Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Dar's Nights. I know many of you use these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable and begin. Story 1. They were just kids. 5 of them, barely out of high school, all drunk on the thrill of summer and the illusion of invincibility. The year was 1996. The plan was simple. Drive deep into Red Hollow Forest, far from curfews and parents, pitch a tent, smoke whatever Sean brought in his backpack, drink from whatever bottles Claire had snuck out of her dad's liquor cabinet, and spend the weekend doing what reckless teenagers do. No one was supposed to die. It was supposed to be the last wild hurrah before college split them apart. They were tight-knit, all of them, Sean, Claire, Tyler, Mia, and Chris. They'd grown up on the same street in a sleepy Pennsylvania town, riding bikes through suburban cul-de-sacs and playing manhunt until porch lights flickered on. But the forest was something else. It was older than their town, darker than their innocence, and it held secrets that had long rotted beneath fallen leaves and moss-covered stones. The ranger's cabin wasn't even on any map. Sean had heard about it from his older cousin, who claimed it was condemned after a fire in the late 70s. Something about a ranger who lost his mind and vanished into the woods. Urban legend stuff. But Sean insisted he'd found it once before. Said it was still standing, barely. Just walls and a roof, and a basement that no one should ever go in. Of course, that's exactly what made it the perfect campsite. They parked the Jeep a few miles out, near an unmarked trail that Sean claimed would lead them there. For the first 2 hours, it was just laughter and joking and loud music from the portable speaker Claire had duct-taped to her backpack. But as the trail narrowed and the canopy grew thicker, the mood began to shift. The air got colder, despite the summer heat. Birds stopped chirping. The path turned to soft earth that seemed to swallow their footsteps. Mia kept looking over her shoulder. Chris joked that a bear was following them. Claire didn't laugh. They reached the cabin just before dusk. It was exactly as Sean described, dilapidated, crooked, like it had grown from the forest itself. The wood was gray and weathered. The windows were smashed, the front door hanging by a single hinge. Moss crawled up the sides, and the chimney was cracked, leaning like it might collapse if you breathed too hard near it. Inside, it smelled like mildew and ash. The fireplace still had charred logs in it, and claw marks, real, deep gouges, scarred the walls. But the kids were thrilled. Tyler said it was metal as hell, and everyone unpacked and set up their sleeping bags in a circle on the floor. Claire lit candles. Chris pulled out a Bluetooth speaker and played something loud and angry. They drank. They laughed. The cabin seemed less scary with music and firelight and teenage arrogance. But just after midnight, the air changed again. It was Claire who heard it first, a faint sound, like whispering from the trees. She thought it was the wind at first. Maybe owls. But then it got closer. A breathy, rhythmic chant, too deliberate to be nature. She turned off the speaker. Everyone froze. Silence. Then, from the back of the cabin, a knock. 3 taps. Soft. Almost polite. Sean grabbed a flashlight and flicked it toward the back door. Nothing there. He laughed, said it must have been a tree branch. But when he walked outside to check, he didn't come back for 10 minutes. When he did, he was pale and shaking. "There's carvings," he whispered. "On the trees. Everywhere." They followed him out, against better judgment, and found them, strange symbols etched into the bark. Circles and crosses and slashes, some fresh, some so old the trees had started to heal over them. Claire took pictures. Mia cried. Chris cursed. They argued about leaving, but none of them wanted to hike back in the dark. So they stayed. Locked the doors. Blocked the windows with their bags. No one slept. The whispering came back around 3 a.m., louder this time. The kind that crawls down your spine. The kind that sounds like it's saying your name. By sunrise, they decided to leave. But Sean was gone. No one heard him leave. No one saw him step out. His boots, his bag, gone. They searched the woods, screamed his name, but the forest swallowed every sound. The trail they'd taken to the cabin no longer made sense. It forked in directions none of them remembered. Trees seemed to shift while they weren't looking. Mia started talking nonsense, muttering phrases they didn't understand. She scratched at her arms until they bled. Claire tried to hold her down, but Mia bit her hard. Drew blood. Tyler wanted to split up and search wider. Claire refused. Chris sided with Tyler. They fought. It got physical, and then Chris stormed off into the trees, shouting about going back to the car on his own. They never saw him again. 2 days later, a search team found the Jeep, but no trace of the kids. Just tire tracks. 5 missing teens. 1 dilapidated cabin. And a legend that had been dead for decades suddenly alive again. The investigation was a media circus. Parents cried on camera. Psychics came forward. Paranormal investigators made YouTube videos. But the forest kept its secrets. Until 2002. 6 years after they vanished, a hunter named Roy Timmons went off trail near Red Hollow and stumbled upon something strange. What looked like bones, scattered across a clearing half a mile from where the cabin used to stand. They brought in the police. Cadaver dogs. Forensics. It was them. Or what was left of them. Claire's bracelet. Tyler's class ring. Sean's backpack. But the bones weren't just bones. They were carved. Symbols etched into the skulls, ribs, and femurs. Same markings found on the trees. Clean, precise, like someone had taken their time. There was no sign of trauma. No broken bones. No cause of death. Just those impossible carvings, like they'd been offered up to something. Arranged deliberately, as if on display. And then there were the screams. First reported by hikers. Faint at first. Then louder. Blood-curdling. Coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Always around midnight. Always near the old cabin site. Locals stopped going into Red Hollow. The forest became infamous. The state fenced off the trail and declared it a no-access zone. Still, thrill-seekers tried to sneak in. Most came back terrified. A few didn't come back at all. But the scariest part? The screams aren't always the same. Sometimes it's a woman. Sometimes a man. Sometimes it's a voice calling a name. Chris, Claire, Sean. Other times, it's a whisper that no one can quite describe. Just one thing is always true. Once you hear it, you dream about the cabin. And in the dream, you're the one knocking at the back door. The screams had become a pattern. Every summer, as the heat baked the canopy of Red Hollow and the undergrowth thickened like veins across the forest floor, someone heard them. Campers. Hikers. Rangers. Always around midnight. Always just out of reach. People described them as echoing from the trees, but too close, like someone was screaming directly into your mind. One man claimed they followed him home, his dreams invaded by flickering candlelight, blood-stained wood, and faces he didn't recognize, weeping from the corners of darkened rooms. Another woman refused to speak after her encounter. She wandered out of the forest barefoot, eyes wide, lips cracked and trembling. She was never able to explain what she saw, but she drew obsessively afterward, dozens of sketches of a crooked cabin in the woods, always with something standing behind it. Watching. Waiting. The state finally demolished what was left of the ranger's cabin. Brought in a demolition crew, bulldozers, even clergy. The wood was burned, the ashes buried. Concrete was poured over the site. Signs were posted. And for a while, the forest went quiet. But silence never lasts long in places like that. In 2019, 23 years after the original disappearances, a podcaster named Grant Holloway decided to investigate the Red Hollow legends. His show, Ghost Atlas, was growing popular for digging into cold cases and forgotten folklore. He was meticulous, thoughtful, skeptical enough to earn trust, but open-minded enough to keep believers listening. He interviewed surviving family members. He combed through old police reports. He even got access to some of the forensic photos, long buried in a dusty cabinet of a small-town sheriff's department, half forgotten. What he found chilled him. The carvings on the bones weren't random. They matched obscure Nordic runes. Symbols for death, rebirth, sacrifice, and something else. Something that had no translation. A symbol that didn't belong anywhere. He brought his team, just 2 others, a sound tech named Mason and a field researcher named Lily, into the woods with him that October. They hiked in the day before Halloween and planned to spend one night near the old cabin site. Just to record ambient sound. Just to chase a story. They never posted the episode. What authorities found 3 days later was a shredded campsite. Tent slashed from the inside. Recording equipment smashed. Their Jeep was untouched, keys still in the ignition. But there was no sign of Grant, Mason, or Lily. Just one audio recorder, still intact, hidden beneath a pile of leaves. The final recording, later leaked online, was over 4 hours long. It starts with laughter. The trio joking, setting up gear, talking about how creepy the place feels. Then, around 11:47 p.m., something changes. Wind picks up. The trees begin to creak, not sway, but groan, like bones under pressure. Then come the whispers. Faint at first, like a crowd murmuring from a distance. Then closer, more distinct. Chanting. Grant's voice can be heard, trying to identify the language. Mason curses. Lily begins praying. Then, suddenly, silence. What follows is a sound that has never been identified. A screech, not quite human, not quite animal, like metal tearing through flesh, played backward through a broken speaker. The final 30 seconds of the tape are just breathing. Wet, heavy, deliberate. And then, 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. No one ever saw them again. The state issued another warning. Closed the entire section of the forest. Posted guards during the summer months. But the damage was done. The story was out. Red Hollow became internet legend. Urban explorers risked their lives for clicks. Paranormal channels claimed to capture voices in the woods. Even skeptics started to admit that something about that forest felt wrong. But for all the noise and theories, the truth stayed buried in shadows. Until the boy came back. In the summer of 2022, a 10-year-old boy named Eli wandered away from his family's cabin rental on the edge of Red Hollow. His parents searched for an hour before calling authorities. Drones were deployed. Search parties assembled. He was gone for over 32 hours. When they found him, he was sitting at the edge of a creek, dirty but unharmed. Calm. Too calm. He didn't speak for 2 days. Doctors said he was in shock. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for his parents. He just stared at the ceiling with wide eyes, whispering to himself. When he finally did speak, his voice was flat, cold. He said he'd met the carved ones. He claimed they lived underground, that they whispered through trees, that they told him stories, that they were lonely. He said one of them was named Claire. Authorities brushed it off. Said he'd probably heard about the old case on TV or online. But his parents insisted they'd never talked about it. Never let him near that kind of content. He wasn't allowed YouTube. No social media. He didn't even own a phone. When they asked him to describe the cabin, he did it in detail. Right down to the fireplace, the claw marks, the rotting roof. He drew the runes on the walls without prompting. Then he asked a question that froze every adult in the room. Why didn't the ranger save them? They hadn't told him about the ranger. No news articles mentioned the ranger. That part of the story was buried deep. But Eli knew. He said the ranger came back sometimes. Not in the way people expect. He said the ranger walks backward, wears the forest on his skin, and has no face. Just holes. Deep black holes. The story should have ended there. But Eli started sleepwalking. His parents found him standing outside their rental cabin several nights in a row. Eyes open. Barefoot in the cold. Always facing the woods. One night, he was found knocking gently on the back door. 3 soft taps. He was placed under psychiatric care, diagnosed with trauma-induced dissociation. But his case notes, leaked by a whistleblower, revealed something darker. He wasn't just repeating things. He was predicting them. He spoke of another explorer, someone who hadn't even entered the forest yet, and described how she'd vanish, how her last text would be, "The trees are bleeding." Days later, it happened exactly as he described. A woman from Ohio disappeared near Red Hollow. Her final text to her sister read, "I think the trees are bleeding." Getting back on the trail. The forest wasn't just haunted. It was listening. People began to believe the place itself was alive. Not metaphorically, but literally. That it had a consciousness. That the cabin had never been built by humans at all, but grown. Or summoned. That the ranger was its first offering. There were theories about old rituals, forgotten pagan sacrifices. About a sickness in the land that needed feeding. About how the cabin had never really burned down, just changed its skin. They said it still appears sometimes, for those who need it most. Or deserve it least. They said the screams were bait. The final confirmation came in March 2023, when a geologist scanning Red Hollow for potential sinkholes picked up an anomaly beneath the old cabin site. A void. Not a cave. Not a tunnel. Something deeper. Wider. Artificial. They sent down a probe. It went 50 feet. Then 70. Then 90. At 122 feet, the feed cut off. Just static. And then, tap, tap, tap. The feed was gone, but the tapping remained. Long after the screen showed static, the tech monitoring the probe swore he still heard it. Quiet. Measured. Like a knuckle brushing against a hollow wall. He didn't sleep for days. Quit the project. Moved out of state. Left a note that simply read, "It wants us to know it's not alone down there." They sealed the hole. Or tried to. Concrete was poured, a steel plate was welded over the site. But 2 weeks later, it buckled. From the inside. As if something down there didn't want to stay buried. The authorities panicked. The forest was closed again, this time with fencing, patrols, thermal cameras. Even drones. But every few nights, a guard would report something strange. A shape moving beneath the trees without triggering sensors. A smell like rotting pine. Whispers. Always the whispers. Coming from nowhere. And everywhere. And the dreams. That's what broke them. Several officers stationed there claimed they began dreaming about the cabin. Not as it was, but as it might have been long ago. Clean. Warm. Lit by firelight. A place of comfort, not terror. But always in those dreams, the same thing happened. The walls would begin to bleed. Not blood, but shadows, liquid darkness crawling down from the ceiling like ink. And then, behind them, a door. One that hadn't been there before. A door with a symbol carved into it. The same symbol found on the teen's bones. The one with no name. No origin. Most of the guards quit. The rest were reassigned. And Red Hollow was left to itself again. But the story didn't fade. In fact, it began to spread. That winter, stories of similar cabins emerged from other parts of the country. Appalachia. Oregon. Upstate New York. Remote forests, rarely traveled. Each tale eerily alike. A hidden cabin, unseen on maps. A sudden storm. Lost hikers. Whispers in the dark. Bones found years later, marked with the same untranslatable rune. It was as if the forest had roots that stretched across the nation. And at the end of each root, a mouth. A hunger. The most chilling case came from a small town in Maine. A man named Tom Dillard disappeared while hunting. 2 days later, his daughter received a voicemail. Not a voice. Just tapping. 3 soft knocks. She recognized the sound. When she was a child, Tom had taught her a game. 3 knocks meant, "I'm here." It was something he did every night on her bedroom door before she fell asleep. She thought it was a prank. Maybe a glitch. Until the voicemail repeated itself 3 nights in a row, always at the same time, 3:33 a.m. When she played it for a local investigator, his face went pale. He had received the same voicemail the previous year. And he'd never told anyone. People began to suspect that the forest wasn't a place, but a presence. One that could reach through static, through soil, through silence. One that could wear voices like masks. One that never forgot. Red Hollow's legend went viral. Podcasts, TikToks, documentaries. But the deeper people dug, the more they found connections. A missing scout troop in 1974. A family of 4 vanishing from a roadside cabin in 1952. A Civil War-era journal describing whispers from the pines and the man with no face. Even as far back as native oral history, stories of a cursed grove where the wood walks and the sky forgets your name. It had always been there, watching. The story came full circle when Eli, the boy who claimed to meet the carved ones, spoke again. Now 15, institutionalized, and non-verbal for 3 years, he began humming in his sleep. Nurses noticed it first. A tune, low and haunting. Eventually, he began drawing again. But not pictures. Blueprints. Diagrams of something underground. A structure. A chamber. Symbols. Rituals. Carvings. And always, at the center, a cabin. But not built from wood. From bone. One night, Eli stood in the middle of his room and screamed a single phrase, over and over, until he collapsed. "The door is open." That same week, hikers spotted a strange glow deep within Red Hollow. A pulsing orange light, like fire, but cold. Mechanical. And from that night forward, the screams returned, louder. Angrier. Not just at night. In daylight, too. Sometimes overlapping. Like dozens of voices calling out at once. Sometimes whispering your name, even if you hadn't told anyone you were going into the forest. One ranger quit after hearing his dead brother's voice from the trees. Another shot himself in his truck after finding a note pinned to his windshield. It read, "She's still in there. You left her behind." His sister had gone missing near the cabin in 1997. By the spring of 2024, the forest was fully sealed off. Satellite images blurred. Trails removed from maps. A private security company now patrols the perimeter, but no one knows who hired them. Theories run wild. Government cover-up. Military experiments. Cult activity. But none of them explain how people still go missing. Even from miles away. Even from inside their homes. A woman in Chicago claimed to see the cabin in her dreams. She'd never been to Red Hollow. Had never heard the story. But she described it perfectly. Right down to the blood-stained hearth and the antlers nailed to the ceiling. She said it whispered to her. Said she was chosen. She vanished a week later. Her apartment door was locked from the inside. No signs of struggle. But her bed was covered in pine needles. And next to her pillow, 3 tiny knocks on the wall. By now, most people avoid the story. It's too real, too raw. It has bled from folklore into the bones of reality. But a few brave, or foolish, still seek it out. Urban explorers, witchcraft enthusiasts, paranormal investigators. They never last long. One live stream ended with the camera dropping to the forest floor. Nothing but leaves and static for 20 minutes. Then, faintly in the distance, someone whispered, "She's almost here." The stream cut off. No one has heard from the creator since. And yet, the cabin waits. Sometimes it shows itself. A lone hiker claims to see it in the distance, but when they approach, it's gone. A hunter hears footsteps behind him, but there's no trail. No prints. Just the smell of old fire and something metallic. And in the moments before they vanish, they always describe the same sound. Tap, tap, tap. It's a rhythm now. A signature. The forest's heartbeat. People say it's not a curse but a warning. that the cabin marks those who speak its name, that every time you read about it, every time you think about it, every time you wonder if it's real, you're stepping closer to its door. Because it doesn't need you to find it. It just needs you to listen. So if you're lying awake tonight, if the wind outside seems louder than usual, if you hear the creak of wood in your walls or a faint knock with no one there, don't answer. Don't speak. Don't run. Just close your eyes. And pray the door hasn't already opened. End of Story 1. Story 2. It started with a box. Brown cardboard, no label, no return address. The kind you'd overlook on your porch, rain-warped edges, corners dented like it had been handled carelessly. But it was his son's birthday, so David Granger assumed it was from one of the relatives. Maybe his sister. Maybe his ex, although they hadn't spoken in years. He carried it inside, wiped the water off, and placed it next to the other gifts on the kitchen counter. There was something old about it. Not just the box, but the air around it. A stale, mechanical scent. The kind of smell that clung to childhood basements and forgotten attic trunks. When he opened it, he expected a toy. Maybe a sweater. Instead, inside, was a VHS tape. No label. No writing. Just a black rectangle with a red sticker on its spine. Handwritten in shaky block letters, "Play me." David didn't own a VCR. Not anymore. Who did? It was 2024. But something about the tape gnawed at him. He tucked it away while guests arrived, cake was cut, and laughter filled the house. His son, Jamie, turned 10 that day. His smile made David forget everything for a few hours. Almost everything. That night, after everyone left and Jamie was tucked in with new toys crowding his bed, David found himself standing in the garage, pulling an old box off a shelf. It had been years since he thought about the old VCR. Dust caked the buttons, the power cord frayed, but it still fit into the TV in his den. It hummed to life with a sickly blue flicker. He hesitated before pressing play. Something felt wrong. The screen went black for a moment. Then static. Then a living room. The camera was shaky, low quality, typical of old home video. The timestamp read, May 12, 24, 10:17 p.m. That was tomorrow night. David's blood chilled. The camera didn't move. It was placed on a surface somewhere, pointed toward a couch, dimly lit by a standing lamp in the corner. At first, nothing happened. Then, a man entered frame. His back to the camera. Average height. Blue hoodie. He sat on the couch, rubbed his eyes, reached for something on a side table, probably a drink. David's heart dropped. It was him. There was no mistaking the posture, the scar on the right hand, the shirt he remembered wearing last week. The man on the screen was David Granger. Then the knock came. From inside the video, not real life. 3 taps on a door off-screen. David on the tape stood, walked toward it slowly, vanishing out of frame. A long silence followed. Then, violence. David flinched as the sound of the struggle played through his speakers. Heavy thuds. Grunts. Something shattering. Then a scream, his scream, cut short by a dull, wet sound. A knife, maybe. Then silence again. A few seconds later, the killer stepped into frame. A tall man. Pale face. Blank expression. He wore a paper party hat. Blood smeared his arms. He picked something up off the table, held it to the camera, slowly leaned forward. It was a photo. David and Jamie. Taken last year at the amusement park. The man smiled. Then he whispered something, directly to the camera. David leaned in to hear it. The screen cut to static. He yanked the tape out, heart hammering in his chest. It felt hot. Burning. The smell of melted plastic clung to his fingers. He looked at the time, 11:48 p.m. Less than 24 hours until the moment on the tape. He didn't sleep. The police thought it was a prank. A sick one, maybe, but not a threat. When he tried to show them the tape the next morning, It wouldn't play. Just static. No audio. No timestamp. They took it anyway. Promised to investigate. He saw the way the officer looked at him, like he was unraveling. He wasn't. He knew what he saw. The rest of the day passed in a fog. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow in his house twisted into a shape he didn't trust. He locked every door, shut every window, and placed a kitchen knife under his pillow. Jamie was the only thing that made sense anymore. His innocence. His joy. David couldn't let anything happen to him. As night crept in, the air in the house thickened. Time crawled. By 10 p.m., David had positioned himself in the living room, just like in the tape. He'd turned off the lamp, sat on the couch, waited. 10:10 p.m. His hands shook. 10:15. He thought about running. 10:16. Silence. 10:17. The knock came. 3 slow taps, just like in the tape. David stood, heart pounding in his ears. He crept toward the door, knife in hand, one step at a time. The world outside the window looked normal, too normal. Moonlight spilled across his front lawn. His neighbor's porch light blinked lazily. He reached the door, paused. Nothing moved outside the peephole. Then, another knock, louder. He flung the door open, knife raised. No one was there, just the breeze. He stepped out onto the porch, looked left, right. No one. No footsteps. Nothing out of place. Then, from behind, the living room light flickered. He turned. The TV was on again. Static. He walked back in, slower this time. Closed and locked the door behind him. On the TV, the image returned. But it wasn't the same video. It was the hallway. His hallway. Live. He looked behind him. Nothing. Then, slowly, on the screen, a shadow emerged at the far end of the hallway. The man in the party hat. Only this time, he was already inside. He didn't scream. Couldn't. Something in his throat had clamped shut, like his body refused to believe what his eyes were seeing. On the television screen, the hallway stretched toward the back bedrooms of his house. The camera, somehow now a live feed, showed the exact same worn carpet, the crooked photo frame, the scuff on the white trim near the floor. And from the darkness, the man in the party hat stepped forward. Slow. Measured. Unblinking. David turned his head toward the hallway in real life. Empty. But only for a moment. Then, the faintest shuffle of a footstep. Not on the TV now, but behind him. He spun. Knife raised. Nothing. The hallway remained empty. Lights off. Shadows deep. He turned back toward the TV. The hallway on the screen was now empty too. He felt something cold on the back of his neck. Like breath. He spun again, striking out with the knife, cutting only air. His mind raced. Was this a hallucination? A breakdown? He blinked, trying to clear the dizziness creeping into the corners of his vision. Jamie. He needed to get to Jamie. He darted down the hallway, bursting into his son's room. The boy was sound asleep, curled up in his blankets, stuffed dinosaur tucked under one arm. Peaceful. Untouched. David locked the bedroom door behind him and crouched by the bed, knife still in hand. He watched his son breathe. In and out. Steady. Safe. But the fear didn't leave. It settled into his bones. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Static on the other end. Then a voice. Low. Flat. Familiar. Time's running out. Click. The call ended. David dropped the phone as if it burned him. He backed against the wall, gripping the knife so tight his knuckles went white. He stayed like that for hours. Eyes wide, locked on the door, waiting for it to rattle, to burst open, for the man in the party hat to appear and finish what the tape had promised. But nothing happened. When dawn finally broke, light trickling through the curtains, the world felt unchanged. Jamie woke up stretching and yawning, oblivious to the hell his father had lived through all night. David didn't mention the man. Not yet. Instead, he drove straight to the police station. This time, they listened. Maybe it was the dark circles under his eyes. Maybe it was the tremor in his voice. But when he insisted that someone had broken into his home, planted cameras, threatened him, someone finally agreed to come take a look. The officer who showed up was named Karen Shaw. Middle-aged, skeptical, but polite. She walked through the house with him, noting everything, asking questions, writing down every detail about the tape, the man in the party hat, the date and time on the video. She looked into the corners. He said the camera might have been hidden. And then she asked the question that stopped him cold. "Where's the VCR now?" David blinked. It was gone. He had left it in the den, hooked up to the TV. But now, the shelf was empty. No VCR. No tape. Just dust and silence. "Are you absolutely sure," Officer Shaw asked carefully, "that it was still there this morning?" He was. 100%. But now it was gone. She gave him a look. Not accusatory. Not pitying. Just confused. "Mr. Granger," she said, "have you been sleeping lately?" He didn't answer. That night, he took Jamie to a motel. He couldn't stay in that house anymore. The walls felt too thin. The shadows too deep. In the cramped motel room, with a flickering fluorescent light and the hum of a soda machine outside, he tried to find some semblance of calm. He gave Jamie an iPad and told him to watch cartoons while he paced. At 10:17 p.m., he locked the bathroom door, turned on the shower for background noise, and sat facing the mirror. Knife in hand. Waiting. No knock came. No shadow. Just the hiss of steam and the flickering pulse of the motel's dying ceiling light. He thought maybe, just maybe, it was over, until the motel clerk slipped a note under his door. He found it at midnight. A single piece of paper. Plain white. Typed in bold black letters. "You changed the tape. You changed your fate. But not your son's." David nearly vomited. He woke Jamie up instantly. Wrapped him in his coat. Didn't even pack. He drove straight to the police again, demanding protection, demanding someone look into the threats, the tape, the note. He showed them the paper. They bagged it as evidence. That was when they brought in someone new. Agent Ray Holloway. FBI. Quiet. Sharp. The kind of man who didn't speak unless he had something to say. He listened to everything. Asked very few questions. But at the end, he said one thing that made David freeze. "You're not the first. There had been others. Other tapes. Other messages. Always on birthdays. Always showing a death that hadn't happened yet. And always ending with the same phrase, 'Play me.'" Agent Holloway didn't give names. But he promised one thing. "We'll keep your son safe." That night, 2 agents were stationed outside the motel. One in a car. One in the lobby. David and Jamie slept in the same bed, the TV on low volume, cartoons playing long after they both passed out. But even safety felt thin. Like paper stretched over fire. At 3:17 a.m., David awoke to static. Not from the TV. From the closet. He stepped toward it slowly. The air colder than it should have been. Each breath visible. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle. Inside, nestled between spare blankets and a luggage bag. A television. Old. Boxy. Glowing faint blue. And in it, the tape played again. Only this time, it wasn't him on the couch. It was Jamie. Older. 16 maybe. Hard to tell. Sitting on a different couch. Different house. Alone. There was no timestamp. But the fear on the boy's face was real. Then the knock came. 3 taps. And Jamie stood to answer it. David slammed the closet door shut. He ripped the TV out, threw it into the motel parking lot, smashing it on the pavement. Agents rushed to him. He was yelling. Rambling. talking about visions and tapes and future deaths and Jamie being taken. They didn't understand. How could they? Jamie was next. And David had no idea how to stop it. David wasn't allowed back into the motel room after that night. He'd broken a television, shouted about death and ghosts, and nearly injured himself trying to rip open the wall behind the closet. Agent Holloway pulled him aside and tried to talk him down, but there was a decision made above both their heads. Jamie was taken into protective custody. Temporarily, they said. Just to calm things down. Just until David could get some rest. He didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Didn't stop pacing the motel parking lot, whispering to himself, trying to connect dots that weren't meant to connect. The man in the party hat. The tapes. The way Jamie had looked in that second video, older, but terrified. Like he'd been running all his life. It wasn't just a warning. It was a curse. The next day, Agent Holloway met David at a coffee shop. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "There's something I didn't tell you," Holloway said, lowering his voice. "Because it was sealed. Redacted years ago." David leaned in, heart pounding. "There were 6 other cases before yours. 6 families. 6 tapes." He pulled out a file and opened it slowly. Black and white photos. Pages covered in blocked-out lines. But David could make out enough. All 6 ended in a death. All 6 had one thing in common. They tried to change the outcome. Every time. And the more they tried, the worse the result. David stared at a photo of a burned-down house. Another of a mangled car wreck. A boy, maybe 8 years old, found drowned in his own bathtub. But why? David whispered. Holloway shook his head. "We don't know." But every victim received a final tape. No matter how hard they ran, or how much they resisted, it always ended with the same message. He handed David a crumpled, blood-stained envelope, sealed in plastic. Typed on the front in block letters, "You were always the ending." David pushed the file away, bile rising in his throat. "They're playing God," he muttered. "These people. Whoever's doing this." But Holloway didn't look convinced that people were behind it at all. "You said Jamie was older in the second tape," Holloway said slowly. "Describe the room. Everything you can remember." David closed his eyes, trying to picture it. A bookshelf. Posters on the wall. A football jersey. Some kind of light strip around the ceiling. Neon. Holloway nodded slowly. "We have facial reconstruction tech. If we feed that image into aging software, and then monitor online school records, facial matches, maybe we can track where this version of Jamie exists, or will exist." David didn't have hope left in him. But he nodded anyway. It was all he had. 3 days passed. On the morning of the 4th, David's phone buzzed with a text from Holloway. "Meet me at the field. Come alone. Urgent." No punctuation. No explanation. Just a location pin, deep in the woods, just outside the county line. David drove. He didn't question it. Not really. He just wanted answers. Or to die trying. The path led to an old football field. Overgrown. Grass waist-high. Bleachers rusted through. It looked abandoned for years. But something about it prickled the back of his neck. As he stepped out of the car, he saw a flicker of movement in the far goalpost. A man. Wearing a party hat. David froze. The man waved at him. Not a mocking wave. Not a threat. Just a slow, casual greeting. David gripped the knife in his coat pocket. He stepped forward. 20 feet. 10. Then the man turned and walked away, toward a crumbling storage shed beside the bleachers. He left the door open behind him. David followed. Inside, the room was dark. The air smelled of mildew and rot. In the center, on a fold-out table, sat an old television. And a tape. Labeled, Play ME. David's hand shook as he slid the tape into the VCR and pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. Static. Then, a birthday party. Balloons. Cake. Jamie, older again, laughing. David watched in horror as the older version of his son opened a present. Inside, a VHS tape. On it, Play ME. David watched the boy pop it into the VCR. And on that second screen, yet another video began. This one showed David, sitting on the same field, watching the same tape, watching Jamie receive the tape. A loop. An impossible, spiraling loop. And then, Jamie looked straight into the camera, right at David. "I'm sorry, Dad," the boy whispered. "You have to finish it, or I'll take your place." David staggered back, eyes wide. The man in the party hat was suddenly beside him, closer than should have been possible. David reached for his knife, gone. The man raised one hand and pointed behind David. David turned, and saw himself on the screen, eyes sunken, blood dripping from his mouth. Dead. The man in the party had pressed eject on the VCR. Out popped the tape, and he handed it to David, then vanished, like smoke. David stood there for what felt like hours, alone, holding the tape, the weight of fate heavy in his hands. He drove home. He didn't remember starting the engine, didn't remember the roads. But somehow, he was back in his driveway. Lights off. House dark. Inside, the den was as he left it. Except the VCR was back. Waiting. David sat, inserted the tape, and watched his own death play again. This time, the knock came immediately. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked slowly to Jamie's room, kissed his son on the forehead, then went back to the den, and waited. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the door opened. But there was no one there. Just the party hat, sitting on the doorstep. David picked it up, placed it on his head, and sat back down on the couch. The TV turned itself off. No static, just black. When the agents found him the next morning, David was still seated, eyes wide open. No wounds, no sign of struggle. Dead. Peaceful. Almost smiling. The VCR was gone. No tape. No fingerprints. Just one piece of paper on the coffee table. You were always the ending. Jamie was adopted by a family out of state. Quiet place. New name. But every birthday, no matter how far they moved, a package would arrive, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, a VHS tape, and a note. Play me. End of story 2. Story 3. Midnight highways have a way of talking to you. Sometimes they whisper through the hum of your tires or the radio static that never quite tunes in. Other times they scream. And if you're unlucky, like Wayne Colburn was, they answer back. Wayne had been driving rigs for 27 years. He was the kind of guy who kept to himself, slept in his cab, drank black coffee from cracked thermoses, and listened to the road more than the chatter on the CB. He liked the night runs, less traffic, more quiet, and fewer questions. But there was something different about Route 119 that night. It was a long stretch of asphalt cutting through West Virginia, bordered by dark trees and moonlight, winding like a snake that had forgotten where it started. The fog had rolled in thick, swallowing the truck's headlights. Wayne leaned forward, squinting into the gray veil, when he saw him, a figure on the shoulder, standing there with one thumb out and the other hand wrapped around a small canvas bag. Wayne should have kept driving. Everything in his gut told him to. But that thumb, that look, something about it, it felt too familiar. Like a face you'd seen in a dream or a place you used to live in another life. So Wayne slowed the 18-wheeler to a crawl and cracked the passenger door open. The young man climbed in without a word. No name, no thanks. Just sat there, gently placing the bag on his lap. His clothes looked worn, tattered jeans, faded jacket, boots that had seen too many winters. His hair was long, tangled, falling into his eyes. Pale skin. Almost too pale. Wayne cleared his throat. You all right, son? The young man nodded slowly, never quite looking at him. Where you headed? Anywhere but here. The voice was quiet. Dry. Like dust sliding over wood. Wayne shrugged and pulled the door shut. Fair enough. They rode in silence for almost an hour. Just the hum of the road and the occasional croak of frogs from the woods. Wayne didn't press. Some hitchhikers had stories they didn't want to share. But then the kid spoke. They used to dump bodies here. Wayne blinked. What? Right back there, the kid said, gesturing behind them with his thumb. Mile marker 53. Between the pine trees. 2 men used to bring people out there. They'd say they were gonna help them start over. But they never did. Wayne gripped the wheel a little tighter. Is that so? Yep, the kid said. 6 of them. Maybe more. I think they buried me there too. But I can't remember all of it. Wayne's mouth went dry. He glanced in the rear-view mirror. The passenger seat behind him was empty. Not just empty, spotless. No scuff marks. No signs of someone sitting there at all. His heart started to pound. He turned his head. The kid was still beside him, looking forward, hands resting on that little canvas bag like it held something precious. Or dangerous. Wayne forced a laugh. You pull that story out of a horror podcast or something? The kid smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. I lived it. Wayne looked forward again. Didn't say a word for the next 10 miles. The fog didn't lift. In fact, it grew thicker. The kind of thick that messes with your depth perception. Makes trees look like faces and signs look like warnings. Wayne kept glancing at the kid, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Or what he wasn't. Ever hear of the Boone Hollow vanishings? The kid asked suddenly. Wayne nodded, jaw tight. Yeah. Heard they blamed some cult. Never found bodies, though. Not all of them, the kid whispered. Some were left as a message. The rest, they just disappeared. Like the earth swallowed them. Wayne swallowed hard. And you think you were one of them? The kid looked at him finally. Really looked at him. I know I was. The air inside the cab felt colder. Wayne reached over and turned off the radio. The static had been whispering for the last mile, but now it was spitting something that sounded like names. He turned it back on. Static. Off again. Silence. You ever look at yourself in a mirror, the kid said, and not recognize who's looking back? Wayne didn't answer. The kid continued. Sometimes I think I'm still down there. That this is just the echo. A version of me trying to make it back. But I can't get out of the truck. Wayne stared ahead. Been riding with drivers ever since. Most don't see me. But you did. Wayne's fingers tightened around the wheel. Why me? The kid didn't reply. Instead, he opened his bag slowly. Inside was a bundle of old photographs. Wayne caught glimpses as the kid leafed through them, blurry black and whites of people standing in front of run-down cabins, muddy trails, faces half-lit by bonfires. One photo dropped to the floor. Wayne picked it up. It was him, younger, maybe 20 years ago, standing beside his old truck with a hitchhiker in frame. The same hitchhiker. Only the background didn't make sense. The trees were wrong. The truck had a license plate he didn't recognize. And his own face looked off. You picked me up once before, the kid said softly. Long time ago. Same road. You told me I reminded you of your brother. Wayne dropped the photo. I never had a brother. That's what you said last time too. The road narrowed ahead. A tunnel loomed, carved into the side of the mountain. Wayne had driven through it a dozen times before, but something about it now felt wrong. Like it had been waiting. As they entered, the lights overhead flickered. The hum of the truck echoed louder than it should. Halfway through, the kid spoke again. They never stop looking, you know. The ones who died here. Some walk. Some whisper. Some get in trucks like mine." Wayne turned to him. "What do you want from me?" The kid looked down at his bag. "There's something in here. Something I left behind." He reached in and pulled out a rusted key. "Cabin 7. Boone Hollow." Wayne nearly swerved. "I don't go there." "You will," the kid said, "because you were there too. Long before the road forgot. You just don't remember yet." The tunnel ended. The light outside was wrong. Pale orange. Like dusk and dawn had fused into something unnatural. The trees were the same, but older. Twisted. Wrong. Wayne realized the signs were missing. The road felt unfamiliar, even though he'd never left it. He pulled the truck over. Put it in park. The kid was staring ahead, eyes wide now. "They're close. I can feel them." Wayne opened his door, stepping out onto the pavement. The air was thick, wet. He turned back toward the cab. The passenger seat was empty. No bag. No photos. No hitchhiker. He climbed back in, trembling. As he settled into the seat, something fell from above the visor. It was the key. Still warm. Wayne drove. Not because he wanted to, but because now he had to. And behind him, in the mirror, he swore he saw the kid again. Smiling. Not at Wayne, but at something sitting in the sleeper berth. Something Wayne hadn't noticed before. Wayne didn't sleep that night. Not because of the key in his hand or the chill that had crept into the cab like a phantom whisper, but because he knew something had followed him. Not on the road. Not outside. Inside. There are rules to long-haul driving. One of them is never second-guess what you've seen in your mirrors. If you see headlights, they're there. If you catch something in the rear view, even for a second, it was real enough. But the reflection he saw wasn't headlights. It wasn't a car or a passing rig. It was someone sitting on his bed, legs dangling, back turned. The problem was, when Wayne turned around, the berth was empty. The smell stayed, though, faint like wet pine, mold, and something older. Something that didn't belong to this century. He kept driving. Didn't even know where he was anymore. No signs. No GPS. Just trees that leaned in too close and shadows that moved like they were watching. By sunrise, he reached a gas station that looked like it had been pulled out of time. The signs were sun-bleached. The pump prices were wrong. The air was still. He climbed out and went inside. The clerk behind the counter had eyes like stone. He didn't look up from his magazine when Wayne walked in. "Need diesel," Wayne muttered. "And directions. Route 119. The clerk licked his thumb and turned a page. "Ain't been no Route 119 in 30 years. Wayne frowned. "What are you talkin' about?" "I was just—" "You been drivin' through Boone Hollow," the man interrupted. "That stretch you're talkin' about was shut down after the disappearances." Wayne's blood ran cold. "What disappearances?" The man's eyes finally met his. "You sure you want to know?" Wayne didn't answer. The man sighed, tossed the magazine aside, and nodded to the corner where an old newspaper clipping was pinned to a corkboard. Yellowed, curling at the edges. Wayne stepped over and read it. 6 vanish in Boone Hollow. Police suspect cult activity. Underneath the headline were grainy photos. One of them showed a forest trail with police tape. Another, a cabin burned to the foundation. The last one stopped Wayne's heart. It was the hitchhiker. Same face. Same hair. Only the date on the paper was from 1996. Wayne staggered back. "You all right there, driver?" the clerk asked. Wayne didn't reply. He stumbled out the door, eyes wide. There was a payphone next to the pumps. He shoved in a quarter and dialed his dispatch. Nothing. No dial tone. He tried again. Still nothing. He looked at the truck. There, sitting in the passenger seat, was the hitchhiker. Smiling. Wayne dropped the phone and ran. He jumped into the cab, heart pounding. "You're dead," he whispered. The kid tilted his head. Maybe. Maybe not. But you picked me up. And now you gotta finish it. Wayne grabbed the wheel. Finish what? Remembering. The truck roared to life like it had been waiting for the signal. The kid pointed ahead. There's a turn coming up. You'll know it when you see it. Wayne didn't ask questions anymore. Something had cracked inside him. The kind of break that doesn't heal, just keeps getting wider. He drove. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time had lost meaning. Finally, the turn appeared. A rusted sign barely hanging from a chain-link post. Boone Hollow. Do not enter. The road was dirt. Uneven. Barely a trail. He took it. The trees grew taller here. Denser. Like they were protecting something they didn't want found. The kid didn't speak. Just stared ahead, eyes locked on something only he could see. At the end of the trail was a clearing. A stone foundation. Some rotting beams. Ashes long gone cold. Cabin 7. Wayne parked. The second he stepped out, the forest went silent. No birds. No bugs. Not even wind. He approached the ruin slowly, the key clutched in his fist. It was warm again. Pulsing. He reached the doorway, or what was left of it, and stopped. There was a door. Standing upright, connected to nothing. Just floating in place. Weathered wood. Iron knob. He looked back. The kid was gone. Wayne turned to the door. And opened it. On the other side was not the forest. It was the cabin. Not ruined. Not burned. Intact. Lit by lanterns. He stepped through. And stepped back in time. The floor creaked under his boots. The air was thick with smoke, whiskey, and something metallic. There were voices. 2 men arguing in the next room. Then a scream. Then nothing. He moved down the hall, heart hammering. Each step felt heavier, like he was walking into his own grave. At the end of the hall was a room. The walls were covered in photos. Of him, Wayne, in different stages of life. Younger, older, driving different trucks, standing in places he'd never been or couldn't remember. In one photo, he was standing with the hitchhiker. In another, he was holding a shovel. In a third, he was dragging a tarp into the woods. Wayne fell to his knees. "No," he whispered. "I didn't. I wouldn't." But the memories came rushing back. He'd been here before. More than once. He'd helped them. 2 men. Old friends. They said they were protecting something. That the people they brought to the cabin had to die. That it was for the forest. For the town. And Wayne had believed them. Because back then, he'd seen things too. Things that made him question what was real. A girl with black eyes. A dog that spoke. A storm that never ended unless someone was buried beneath it. So he'd helped. He didn't kill anyone. But he drove them. He delivered them. And then he forgot. Until now. The hitchhiker appeared in the doorway. "You remember now." Wayne couldn't speak. "They buried me behind the cabin," the kid said. "With 5 others. You dug the holes." Tears burned Wayne's cheeks. "I was just the driver." The kid knelt beside him. "Everyone's just something. Until they're not." He held out the key. Wayne took it. It burned his palm. "You can finish it," the kid whispered. "Or you can stay here." The cabin creaked. The walls pulsed. Voices rose from the floor. Wayne stood. Walked to the back door. Opened it. Behind the cabin, 6 shallow graves. Dirt shifted. Bones rose. He dropped to his knees. And started digging. With bare hands. With tears. With everything he had left. Until the graves were empty. Until the bones were free. Until the forest sighed. The kid stood above him. "You brought us here. Now you're taking us home." Wayne nodded. He walked back to the truck. Each step lighter. When he looked in the mirror again, the berth was full. 6 passengers. Silent. Waiting. He turned the key. The engine purred. He drove. Back through Boone Hollow. Back through time. To finish what he started. The truck hummed down the highway, the tires chewing up the miles in silence. Wayne didn't look back. He couldn't. The faces in the mirrors had finally stopped staring, but he felt them, always there, always watching, just out of his sight. The wind whispered against the truck like a warning. It howled in the trees, far away, but Wayne could feel it in his bones. Cold. Ancient. As if it had been waiting for him to arrive. There was a strange sense of peace, too. As if the air around him had been purified by something dark. The weight of the night lifted. But only for a moment. The quiet was louder now than the screaming had ever been. The radio was static. No signal. Nothing. Wayne adjusted the wheel, eyes focused straight ahead. The road was familiar, yet it wasn't. His thoughts were clouded, a heavy fog in his mind, but there was one thing that remained clear, the hitchhiker's face. Those dead eyes. The way he had smiled. How he had said finish it like it wasn't an option, but a command. Wayne couldn't even remember the last time he had stopped for fuel. Or food. The truck had driven itself for hours, or maybe days. Time didn't matter anymore. The road ahead was endless, stretching on into darkness. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the rear-view mirror again. There was nothing there. But the feeling didn't fade. The chill in the air, the weight in his chest. He checked the clock. 3:17 a.m. The truck made a low groan as it climbed a hill, headlights sweeping over the curves ahead. The road twisted tighter. He knew he was close to the forest again, close to where it had all started. He could sense the change in the air. The press of something alive, something breathing, just beneath the surface of everything. Wayne had made a deal with something when he first picked up that kid. A promise, unspoken, but understood. No one had told him how to break it, or if it could be broken at all. The wind picked up again, louder now, a scream in the distance, the sound so twisted that Wayne couldn't tell if it was the wind or something else. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. He glanced at the empty passenger seat, and for a moment, he swore he saw a shadow move, something dark and unfathomable. But when he turned, there was nothing. Nothing but the emptiness. He had been driving for hours, or was it days? Everything blurred together. The same road, the same trees, the same darkness. And then he saw it. A silhouette, hunched by the roadside, barely visible in the dim light. The hitchhiker. The trucker slammed his foot on the brake. He didn't know why. He wasn't supposed to stop. He wasn't supposed to see him again. But he did. The truck jerked to a stop, and the hitchhiker, no, the ghost, was already in the seat before Wayne could blink. Sitting there. Smiling. "Did you forget something?" The voice came, low and guttural, as though it had traveled from somewhere deep beneath the earth. Wayne's hands were frozen on the wheel, his heart pounding in his chest. "You're not real," he whispered. His voice was cracked, like he hadn't used it in years. The kid laughed, that low, hollow sound that echoed in Wayne's skull. "You thought you could leave me behind. You thought I would just vanish. You thought I was gone. You were wrong." The words wrapped around Wayne like chains. He gripped the wheel tighter, but his hands were numb, his mind fogged with something that didn't belong to him. His vision blurred, and for a brief, awful moment, the world tilted. "What do you want from me?" Wayne's voice cracked. He could barely speak, the words escaping him in gasps. "To finish what you started," the hitchhiker answered. "To remember. To complete the journey." He wanted to scream, but his voice was trapped in his throat, a knot of terror tightening with every breath. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles ached. He didn't understand why he had stopped. The hitchhiker hadn't moved, hadn't even looked at him yet. But there was no mistaking it. He was there, standing at the edge of the road, staring into the truck's headlights like he had been waiting for Wayne to arrive. Waiting for him to make this exact decision. Wayne knew that he should just drive away, but his body betrayed him. Slowly, the door clicked open. His muscles moved like they weren't his own. He could feel the cold air creeping in, the scent of pine and damp earth filling the cab. The hitchhiker didn't move. It was the same boy. The same face. But there was something different now. His eyes, once just cold and vacant, now seemed to shine with a faint glow. The faintest flicker of recognition. Wayne's heart hammered in his chest. His foot hovered over the accelerator, but his mind was clouded. What was he supposed to do? The hitchhiker stood motionless, his hands clasped in front of him, as if waiting. For what? "Get in the truck," Wayne said, his voice ragged and hoarse. He didn't know why he said it. It wasn't a choice. It was a compulsion, something that had already been written into his fate the moment he had driven that road, the moment he had picked up the kid. The hitchhiker didn't hesitate. Without a word, he slid into the passenger seat, his body as cold and still as a stone. He didn't look at Wayne. Didn't speak. Just sat there, his eyes locked ahead. Wayne couldn't stop himself. He started driving, his hands trembling on the wheel. The road stretched out before him, the headlights cutting through the darkness, but his eyes kept flickering to the mirror. The hitchhiker was still there, sitting perfectly still. There was a sharp turn ahead, one Wayne had passed many times before. But tonight, it felt different. The headlights illuminated a long-forgotten sign, a weathered piece of wood barely hanging from a rusted chain. Boone Hollow. The letters were barely legible, as if the forest itself had tried to erase it from memory. Wayne's foot slammed on the brake. He wasn't supposed to go back there. He couldn't. But the truck kept rolling, the wheels turning on their own, as if the truck itself was leading him back to that place. "No," Wayne muttered, his voice barely audible. "I can't." The hitchhiker turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting Wayne's for the first time. The expression on his face wasn't one of anger or fear. It was understanding. "You've been here before," the boy said, his voice low, distant, as if it had been echoing in Wayne's mind long before he'd ever spoken. "You've always been here. It's time to finish it." Wayne felt his heart stop. The truck seemed to lurch forward, taking the turn on its own. The trees closed in around them, shadows growing darker, deeper, as the road narrowed. He could hear the soft rustle of leaves, but it wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something moving just beyond the edge of the forest. Wayne wanted to stop, but he couldn't. His hands were frozen to the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. There was no turning back. No escaping the pull of this place. The clearing appeared in front of them, just as it had before. The cabin. Not burnt, not abandoned, but alive. Standing there, as if it had never been touched by time. Wayne parked the truck. His legs felt weak as he opened the door and stepped out. The ground was soft under his boots, the earth damp and cool. The cabin loomed ahead, its wooden walls stained dark with age, but still standing, still waiting. The hitchhiker stepped out beside him, silent as ever. "You know what happens here," the boy whispered. Wayne's mouth went dry. His heart was pounding in his ears. He wanted to say something, to stop this madness, but the words wouldn't come. The boy turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "You brought us here," the hitchhiker said. "Now, you're going to finish what you started." Wayne's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground. The weight of the realization hit him like a freight train. He had been part of this. He had driven people to this cabin. He had been part of the disappearances. He had buried the bodies. He had been a part of it all along. The boy reached out and placed a cold hand on his shoulder. "You can't escape the past, Wayne," the boy said. "Not now. Not ever." A scream echoed through the trees, so loud and guttural that it seemed to shake the earth itself. Wayne looked up, eyes wide with terror, but there was no one there. No one but the trees, the cabin, and the echoes of the past. The scream grew louder. More voices joined in, screams of pain, of fear. Faces twisted in agony. But they weren't just sounds. They were memories. His memories. He was drowning in them. Wayne stumbled to his feet, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He couldn't breathe. The air was thick with the weight of it all. He looked around, but the forest had changed. The trees weren't trees anymore. They were faces. Faces of the people he had brought here. Faces of the ones he had helped bury. Their eyes stared at him from every corner, every direction. The hitchhiker stood motionless beside him, as still as ever. But Wayne knew now. He knew what he had to do. He walked toward the cabin, his footsteps heavy. He felt the coldness in his bones, the weight of the years pressing down on him. He had to finish it. He had to end it. As he reached the door, the wind picked up, howling like a beast. The ground trembled beneath his feet. He reached for the door handle, but it opened on its own. Inside, the cabin was the same. The same pictures on the walls. The same wooden floors. But the air was thick, stifling. And there, standing in the middle of the room, was the thing that had been haunting him all this time. It wasn't a man. It wasn't the hitchhiker. It was the forest. The forest that had never let go. The forest that had been feeding on the lives of those who came too close. Wayne didn't scream. He didn't even feel fear anymore. He stepped inside, the door slamming behind him. And when he did, the world went dark. End of Story 3. Story 4. It was a dark, quiet evening when Olivia pulled into the roadside motel. The neon sign flickered above her, casting an eerie red glow over the empty lot. It had been a long drive from the city, and the road was empty, save for the occasional truck speeding past. She was tired, her eyes heavy from hours of staring at the same winding highways. She just wanted a place to sleep, a bed for the night. The motel seemed run down, but it was the only one in sight. The old building stood there like a forgotten relic of time, its peeling paint and cracked windows telling stories of years gone by. The kind of place you wouldn't think twice about stopping at if you were in a rush. The door to the office creaked open as Olivia entered, a musty scent greeting her as she walked in. The clerk, an older man with graying hair, looked up from behind the desk, his tired eyes meeting hers. She could tell by the way his lips tightened that he didn't get many visitors here. "Room for the night?" he asked, his voice low, gravelly. She nodded, reaching for her wallet. "Yes, just for the night. I'll take whatever you have available." The clerk paused, his hand hovering over the keys on the old register. His eyes flickered to the corner of the room, and for a moment Olivia swore she saw a shadow pass behind the desk. He looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "We've got room 313 available," he said after a long silence. "It's an older room, not too popular, but it's clean." Olivia raised an eyebrow. 313. The clerk hesitated before answering, his voice lowering. "It's a bit of a strange room. Some people say it's haunted." Olivia chuckled, a soft, dismissive sound. "Haunted? I'm just passing through. I don't believe in that kind of stuff." The clerk seemed to relax at that, nodding slowly as he handed her the key. "It's your choice, ma'am. Just know that it's been empty for a long time. Some folks don't like staying there. But it's yours if you want it." "Thanks," Olivia said, taking the key and walking toward the door. She didn't give it a second thought. Motel rooms were all the same to her, dim, plain, and temporary. Room 313 was at the far end of the motel, tucked away in a dim corner, almost as if it were trying to hide from the rest of the building. The door was slightly ajar, and she stepped inside, flipping on the light. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed for a moment before they flickered to life, casting a sickly yellow light over the room. The carpet was stained, the furniture dated, and the walls seemed to close in on her, as though the room was smaller than it should have been. She set down her bags on the bed, which had a thick, floral-patterned quilt. It looked like it had been here since the 1980s. The nightstand beside the bed had an old alarm clock, its digital numbers flickering sporadically, as if the device itself had been affected by the room's strange energy. After a long sigh, Olivia threw herself onto the bed, reaching for the remote to turn on the TV. The old set crackled to life, and she flipped through a few channels before settling on something mindless. She could already feel the weariness of the drive creeping in, and her eyes began to droop. But then, a voice. A whisper. "Help! Finish it!" She shot up in bed, heart racing. The voice was faint, like a murmur in the distance. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Her breath steadied, and she shook her head, trying to dismiss the strange feeling gnawing at the pit of her stomach. It was probably just the exhaustion. She glanced around the room, her eyes darting from the cracked window to the corner where the curtains fluttered slightly from the draft. Nothing. No one. She wasn't sure what had triggered the whisper. Maybe it had come from the TV, or maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was just a trick of her tired mind. Olivia lay back down, pulling the covers up to her chin. She tried to push the feeling away, but it lingered. Just as she was about to close her eyes, she heard it again. "Help! Finish it!" Her heart skipped a beat, and this time the voice was clearer, louder, almost as if it were coming from the very walls themselves. She sat up in bed, eyes wide, scanning the room. Was there someone in here? She stood up, walking toward the door, her feet light against the carpet as she reached for the handle. But before she could open it, the voice came again, louder than ever. "Help! Finish it, now!" She froze. The words were unmistakable. They were pleading, desperate. The voice was coming from somewhere else now, outside the room. She opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence, and stepped out into the hallway. The motel was eerily quiet, the other rooms dark and lifeless. The clerk's office was empty, the light off. There was no one else in sight. The hallway stretched on, a long corridor of doors and windows, each one leading to an empty room. Her footsteps echoed softly in the stillness, but the voice was gone, replaced by the unsettling quiet that now filled the air. "Help! Finish it!" The voice echoed again. This time it was clearer, more direct. It was coming from the end of the hallway, room 313. Olivia's heart began to race again as she felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She hadn't imagined it. The voice was real, and it was telling her to do something. Something she didn't understand. "Help! Finish it!" The words hung in the air like a fog, seeping into her thoughts, consuming her. Olivia stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the door to room 313. The unsettling whisper still echoed in her ears, its urgency weighing on her chest. She felt a cold chill crawl up her spine, as if something, or someone, was watching her from the dark corners of the motel. The hallway stretched on like a labyrinth of dimly lit doors, but the oppressive silence only deepened the sense of isolation. She glanced back over her shoulder. The office was still empty, and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above her did little to ease the tension building within her. Should she investigate? Her rational mind screamed at her to go back to her room, forget everything, and get some sleep. It was probably nothing, a draft, maybe, or just her tired mind playing tricks. But something deep inside of her told her that this was no ordinary voice. The whisper came again, faint but clear. "Help! Finish it!" The words seemed to wrap around her like an invisible hand, pulling her toward the source. It wasn't just a voice, it was a plea, a cry for help. Olivia's curiosity got the better of her. She had to know what was happening. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't explain why, but she felt compelled to go toward room 313. The hallway seemed endless, stretching further with every step she took. The air grew heavier, thick with an unexplainable tension, like the very walls of the motel were alive, watching her. When she reached the door to room 313, her hand hovered over the handle. The old metal felt cold under her fingertips. She hesitated for a moment, as if something was telling her to turn back. But the whisper had already burrowed deep into her mind, urging her to open the door. Olivia's pulse raced. She twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The room was eerily still, bathed in the pale light of the single bulb above. Everything was as it had been when she first arrived. The faded carpet, the dusty furniture, the cracked window letting in the cool night air. But there was something different now. Something palpable in the atmosphere. It was as if the room had been waiting for her. "Help! Finish it!" the voice repeated, this time more insistent, coming from somewhere within the room. Olivia's eyes scanned the space, her breath shallow. She stepped inside cautiously, the creaking floorboards beneath her feet sounding far too loud in the stillness. Her gaze fell to the bed where she had lain only hours ago. There was nothing unusual, nothing out of place. But the air itself seemed charged, buzzing with a faint static that made her skin prickle. She moved to the window, hoping the fresh air might help clear her mind. But the moment she pulled the curtain aside, her stomach twisted with unease. The window faced a dense forest, the trees swaying gently in the night breeze. At first, she saw nothing. But then, in the distance, just past the tree line, she thought she saw something moving. A figure, tall, hunched over, moving slowly through the woods. It was almost impossible to make out any details, but it was there. A shadow among the trees, its movements unnatural. Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. She stared at the figure, frozen in place. Who was that? What were they doing out there in the middle of the night? Before she could gather her thoughts, the whisper came again, louder this time, almost desperate. "Help! Finish it!" The voice was unmistakable, and it was coming from the bathroom. Olivia turned toward the door leading to the small, dimly lit bathroom. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to lengthen, as if they were stretching toward her. Without thinking, she walked toward the bathroom, her steps slow and measured. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing the small, tiled space. The sink was covered in dust, and the mirror reflected the dim light above. But there, on the floor, was something that made her blood run cold. A set of footprints, faint but visible, were leading toward the shower. They looked like they had been made recently, as if someone had walked across the floor only moments ago. The prints were clear, but they didn't match any shoes she had seen. The footprints were too large, the edges too defined. Her pulse quickened as she crouched down to get a closer look. The strange footprints seemed to lead into the shower, but there was no one there. She reached out, her hand trembling, and pushed open the shower curtain. Nothing. The shower was empty, the tiles covered in grime. There was no sign of anyone having been there. And yet, the footprints remained, leading into the shower and stopping abruptly. Her thoughts were racing. Was she losing her mind? She couldn't explain what she was seeing. The whole situation felt wrong, like she had stepped into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Olivia gasped and stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood there, frozen in the pitch-black room, her senses on high alert. For a moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat, drowning out the silence. Then, the voice came again, louder than before. "Help! Finish it!" Olivia's blood ran cold. This time, the voice wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from inside her head, echoing in her mind, reverberating through her skull. She stumbled back toward the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled for the handle. The door slammed open, and she was out in the hallway once more, gasping for breath. The lights in the hallway flickered as well, casting brief shadows that danced across the walls. She glanced down the corridor. It was as if the entire motel had come alive, the walls closing in on her. The voices, the whispers, they were everywhere. And they weren't going to stop until she did whatever it was they were asking her to do. Olivia didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. She had to leave this place. And she had to leave now. Olivia burst into the night, gasping for breath as she stumbled from the motel hallway into the parking lot. The cold air hit her like a slap, grounding her, shocking her system. Behind her, the motel loomed silently, dark windows reflecting the moonlight like watchful eyes. She bolted toward her car, fumbling her keys from her coat pocket. Her hands were trembling so violently that she dropped them twice before she managed to shove the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and her headlights cut through the night, illuminating nothing but the cracked pavement ahead. But just as she threw the car into reverse, a voice, clear and sharp, spoke from her back seat. "You can't leave," she screamed, spinning around in her seat. There was no one there. Nothing. Just the empty back seat, and the old VHS tape sitting right where she didn't remember placing it. It was identical to the one she used to watch as a child. Clunky, black plastic, with a white sticker and no label. Her heart sank. She hadn't brought a tape. No one had given her one. And yet, here it was, as if it had been waiting for her all along. She stared at it for a long moment before reaching out, hesitating, then snatching it up with a shaky hand. The tape was warm, too warm, like it had just come out of a machine. As she held it, something deep in her gut twisted. She didn't know why, but she knew she needed to play it. Instead of leaving, Olivia got out of the car and returned to the motel room, tape in hand. The whispers had gone silent. The air inside felt calmer. The oppressive energy had retreated. She slid the tape into the old VCR in the corner of the room and sat at the edge of the bed as the screen flickered to life. At first, static. Then an image, room 313. The very room she was sitting in, but in black and white. Grainy. Empty. Until, slowly, a man and a woman entered the frame. They were young, maybe mid-30s, dressed like they were from another era. Olivia leaned forward. These had to be the couple. The ones from the 80s. The murder victims. The woman was crying. The man was shouting. It was the same argument Olivia had heard every night since she'd arrived, but now she could see it. The slamming door. The screaming. The pacing. The woman trying to leave. The man blocking her way. It was all unfolding in real time. Then, suddenly, the video shifted. The man lunged. The screen crackled, glitched, and then the woman fell. Blood pooled on the floor. The man looked stunned. Frozen. And then, he turned and stared straight into the camera. Straight at Olivia. Her breath caught. The image distorted again, and when it returned, the man was gone. The woman's body lay still, and the only sound was the low hum of static. Then, words appeared on the screen, scrawled in shaky white letters. She was never supposed to die. The screen went black. Olivia sat in stunned silence. Her heart thundered. Her skin prickled. That wasn't just a replay, it was a message. A confession. Something in that room had captured the moment, locked it in time. And now it was calling out to her to make it right. Her gaze shifted to the wall. The wallpaper near the dresser was peeling slightly at the edge. It hadn't caught her attention before, but now, after what she'd seen, her instincts screamed that something was behind it. She crossed the room and peeled the wallpaper back. Behind it, etched directly into the drywall, were dozens of words. Carvings. Desperate scratches. Help me. He didn't mean to. She's still here. Finish it. Over and over again. The same phrases. Repeating. Layered. Written as if by different hands over different years. A chorus of echoes trapped in this room. Olivia stumbled backward. Help me. Finish it, the voice came again, this time from inside her own head. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. The light above her began to flicker again. She turned, and for the first time saw her. The woman from the tape. Standing just outside the bathroom doorway. Pale. Hollow-eyed. Blood soaking the front of her dress. But her face wasn't hateful. It was pleading. Desperate. You have to tell them, the ghost whispered. He didn't kill me. It was someone else. What? Olivia choked out. The ghost took a step forward. Her form flickered like a dying bulb. They blamed him. But he loved me. It was the manager. The one who... She staggered. He filmed it. He changed the tape. Olivia's mind reeled. The motel manager? But he'd be long gone, wouldn't he? Unless... She turned and ran for the front office. The motel lobby was still dark, the front desk abandoned. She went behind the counter, rifling through drawers, cabinets, anything that might hold a clue. Her hands landed on a thick, dusty logbook, dates, names, numbers. Her own name at the bottom. And there, circled multiple times in red ink, a single entry. March 13th, 1987, room 313, Rose G. and Daniel W. The names from the case. The couple. There was a note beside it, in cramped handwriting. Tape burned. Room sealed. No police. No records. Olivia flipped to the last page. A final note. She still talks. He still screams. But they don't know I'm still listening. The page was signed. Carl, manager. Her blood turned to ice. Carl. The quiet man who'd handed her the key 2 nights ago. He was still here. Still alive. Still watching. Suddenly, behind her, a floorboard creaked. She spun around. The old man from the front desk was standing in the shadows of the hallway. He held a long iron rod in one hand. His eyes were wild. "You were supposed to leave," he said flatly. "They always do." Olivia backed away. You killed her." He tilted his head. She was going to tell. She was going to leave with that man. Start over. His voice dropped to a growl. "But I built this place. I made it. They don't get to leave it behind. I saw the tape. The real one. You switched it, didn't you?" Carl's eyes flared. "I had to. No one would understand. They'd shut it down. And they still might, if you talk." He stepped forward. "You're not going to talk, are you?" The rod lifted. But before he could swing, the lights in the entire motel exploded. Darkness swallowed the room. And from it, a scream. Not Olivia's. Carl's. When the lights flickered back on, he was no longer standing. He was on the ground, clutching his throat, gasping for air. Olivia stood frozen, watching as the shadows coiled around him like smoke. Then, one final whisper filled the air. "Now. It's finished." Carl went limp. The room was silent again. Still. Empty. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, Olivia stood alone, the truth unraveling in her mind. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, she drove straight to the nearest town. She turned over the tape. She told the sheriff everything. At first, they thought she was crazy, until they found Carl's body, sprawled in the office, the walls behind him covered in carvings, identical to those hidden under the wallpaper. An investigation was reopened. The truth, long buried, finally clawed its way to the surface. And room 313? It was condemned. Boarded up. Sealed forever. But sometimes, if you pass that lonely stretch of highway on a quiet night, and listen closely, you can still hear them arguing, until the voices fall silent, and begin to speak directly to you. End of story 4. Story 5. It started with a photo. Worn, creased, almost faded into oblivion. Just 2 kids standing outside an old colonial house, arms around each other, sunlight slicing across their faces. The boy was maybe 10. The girl a little younger. Both smiling, the kind of smile you never see again after childhood. Behind them stood the house. Peeling white paint, tall windows, a red mailbox with the numbers 1819 printed crookedly on it. That was the only proof he had left that his sister had ever existed. Matthew stared at the photo for the 100th time, sitting in his 1-bedroom apartment in the city, surrounded by unopened boxes and the stale scent of forgotten memories. It had been 27 years since she died. 27 years since they told him what happened to her. An accident, they said. A terrible, tragic accident. She was playing in the woods and fell into the river. They found her weeks later. Closed casket. No autopsy. Quick burial. He was only 10 then. Grief was a confusing thing. They moved away. Started fresh. His parents barely spoke of her again. Over time, even her name, Anna, faded from conversations. Faded from photo albums. From public records. From everywhere. But that photo, that one picture had always stayed with him. And now, at 37, something had shifted in Matthew. A need. A weight. Like a whisper that wouldn't leave him alone. He had to go back. Back to the town where it all happened. Back to Dover's Hollow. The drive was long, the road winding and slow, the landscape morphing from flat city grids to rolling green hills and thick, quiet woods. Dover's Hollow wasn't on most GPS apps. It barely showed up on Google. A tiny dot of a town in the forgotten folds of Pennsylvania, tucked into a valley surrounded by forest and fog. He passed the old gas station he half remembered from childhood. Still standing. Still dusty. An ancient pump-out front like a rusted relic. Further down the road, a diner with cracked neon lights blinked weakly in the afternoon haze. Yes. When he finally reached the town center, it was like stepping into the past. Everything was muted. Time-worn buildings. A barber shop. A town hall no bigger than a classroom. People moved slowly here, like the world outside didn't exist. Matthew parked near the square and walked to the town clerk's office. Inside, it smelled like yellowed paper and damp wood. A woman in her 60s sat behind the counter, typing something into an old beige computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking up. "I'm looking for a record." "A death certificate," Matthew said. "From 1998. That made her glance up. He continued. "My sister, Anna Walker. She died here when we were kids." The woman frowned slightly. "Walker, you said?" "Yes." "Anna Walker. We lived on Elkhorn Road. House number 1819. She typed something slowly. Silence. "No Walker comes up in our database. Are you sure the name is correct?" Matthew leaned forward. "Yes." "I'm positive. My name is Matthew Walker. We lived here until after she died." Another tap of the keys. "There's no listing for any Walkers in Dover's Hollow from that year. Or the years before. Or after." He blinked. "That's not possible." The woman tilted her head. "Are you sure you're thinking of the right town?" He opened his backpack and pulled out the photo. "This is the house. This is us. That's in this town." She studied the image, then shook her head. "I don't recognize the house. Or the girl. I've lived here my whole life." Matthew's chest tightened. "What about old property records? Elkhorn Road. House 1819. There is no Elkhorn Road." Her words felt like cold water. "Excuse me. There's no street by that name in Dover's Hollow. Never has been." Matthew left the office in a daze. The photo still clenched in his hand. No records. No street. No death certificate. But he remembered. He remembered the way the house creaked in the wind. He remembered the swing in the backyard where Anna used to sit and hum. He remembered the night she disappeared. The way the police came. The way their parents cried. He remembered. So why didn't anyone else? Why did it feel like she had been erased? The diner across the street looked unchanged from what he remembered. He went in, the bell above the door jingling softly. Inside, a waitress with tired eyes looked up and offered a polite nod. A few old-timers sat in booths, murmuring over coffee and scrambled eggs. He ordered a coffee, then pulled out the photo again. "Excuse me," he said to the waitress as she refilled his mug. "Do you recognize this house?" She leaned in. "No," she said after a moment. "Can't say I do. And the kids?" She squinted. "That your sister?" "Yes." "Her name was Anna. She died here." The waitress paused. Her brows knit together like she was trying to reach for something in her mind, but couldn't quite grab it. "I've been here since '85, she said slowly. "I've seen a lot of families come and go." But no. No walkers. No Anna. Matthew sat back, frustration bubbling just under the surface. It wasn't just the town that had forgotten. It was like she had been surgically removed from reality. He returned to his car, gripped the steering wheel, and stared at the street ahead. He had two choices: leave, like the town wanted him to, or go deeper. He chose deeper. He drove around the outskirts, circling roads that seemed vaguely familiar. The woods thickened, the light dimming through dense trees. And then, there it was. A crooked wooden sign half buried in vines. Elkhorn RD. His breath hitched. It existed. Hidden. Forgotten. But still real. He turned onto the narrow path, tires crunching gravel. The forest pressed in tight on both sides. And just when he thought maybe it had all been a dream, the house appeared. Old. Rotting. Half swallowed by ivy and moss. The white paint now a patchwork of mold and dirt. The red mailbox still there, 1819, faded but legible. He stopped the car. Got out. The silence was thick. The air smelled of damp earth and rot. He approached the front porch. The wood groaned under his weight. Windows were shattered. The front door stood slightly ajar. Inside, it was like a time capsule. Broken furniture. Dust. A child's toy in the corner. A photo frame face down on the floor. He picked it up. It was the same photo. Him and Anna. How did it get here? His mind reeled. He moved through the house. The living room. The kitchen. The back hallway where they used to race. Memories assaulted him with every step. Anna's laughter. Her footsteps. The night she ran down this hallway and vanished. Then the basement door. Still there. Closed. His heart pounded. He reached for the knob and turned. Darkness. A cold blast of air. He took the steps slowly, one by one, the old wood groaning beneath him. The basement smelled like mold and something else. Something metallic. Rust. Blood. He reached the bottom. His flashlight beam danced across old boxes. Broken shelves. A rocking horse. A small shoe. And then, the sound of breathing. Not his. He spun. Nothing. But the air had shifted. It felt crowded. He moved forward, shining the light into corners. Shadows danced. Then he saw it. On the far wall, words scratched into the wood. She never left. Suddenly, the light died. Total darkness swallowed him whole. Darkness wasn't just a lack of light down in the basement. It was a presence. It pressed in on Matthew's chest like a weight, like something waiting, silent and alive. He fumbled for his flashlight, smacking the side of it with his palm. Nothing. The battery was full just minutes ago. But now, dead. The only sound was the faint wheeze of his breath and that strange, rhythmic creaking above. Like someone walking slowly across the floor upstairs. But he was alone. Wasn't he? He took out his phone, turned on the flashlight app, and swept the dim glow across the basement again. Shadows retreated, revealing the same broken shelves and cobweb-laced corners. But the writing on the far wall, it hadn't been a trick of the light. It was still there. She never left. The letters were deep, carved with something sharp and angry. Matthew moved closer, studying the edges. There were faint scratches around the words, like someone had tried to scratch them out later, to bury them. But they remained, jagged and defiant. Below the message, he saw something else, numbers etched faintly into the wood. 12/04/1998. Anna's date of death. But no one in this town remembered her. No one except this house. And maybe, whatever had carved that message. Suddenly, a soft whisper brushed past his ear. He turned sharply. No one. But the air had shifted again. It felt electric. He backed away slowly, flashlight trembling in his grip, and began climbing the stairs 2 at a time. When he reached the top and burst into the hallway, the light from outside had dimmed. The door he'd left open was now closed. No wind, no breeze, just a slow, almost deliberate closing of the past behind him. He yanked the door open and stumbled outside, gasping as if he'd surfaced from deep water. The woods were quiet again. The house loomed behind him like a corpse pretending to sleep. He didn't sleep that night. He checked into a cheap motel off the highway, one of those places with buzzing lights and cigarette burns in the bedspread. But even there, the memories chased him. Dreams, no visions, of Anna standing at the top of the basement stairs, eyes hollow, lips moving with no sound. When he woke, his phone was on the floor, the flashlight still on, and the screen displayed a single note he hadn't typed. Ask about the grave. The next morning, he returned to the town hall. A different clerk was at the desk this time. Younger, maybe in her 20s. Blonde, bored, flipping through a magazine. "Hi," Matthew said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I was here yesterday, looking for death records." She blinked at him. "Name?" "Anna Walker. Died December 4th, 1998. There's no record, apparently, but I know she was buried here. Somewhere." The girl typed into her computer, chewing gum loudly. "Nope. No Anna Walker. You sure you got the right county? I grew up here. I found our house." Now she looked up. "What house?" 1819 Elkhorn Road. She stared at him blankly. "That street doesn't exist." He sighed, pulling out the photo again. "This house. This girl. She was real." The girl took the photo, studied it. Her brow furrowed slightly. "She looks familiar." Matthew perked up. "You've seen her?" "I don't know. Maybe. There's an old cemetery out near the woods, way off the main road. My grandma used to take me there sometimes. There was a kid's grave with no name, just a date. 1998. Same year you said." His breath caught. "Where is it?" She scribbled directions on a napkin. An hour later, Matthew was standing at the edge of the forest, facing a rusted gate half-eaten by weeds. The cemetery inside was ancient. Headstones crumbled, moss-covered, names fading to dust. Trees grew wild between graves, roots curling like fingers through cracked earth. He walked slowly, scanning the stones. Most were unreadable. But then, near the back, under a dead tree, he found it. A small headstone, child-sized. The surface was smooth, no name, no inscription, just the date. 12/04/1998. He knelt down. "This is you, isn't it?" he whispered. "Anna." A sudden gust of wind blew through the trees, sending leaves spinning. The air turned cold. He stood, and something caught his eye, a flash of movement. In the tree line, a figure, small, pale, watching him. He blinked, and she was gone. But the message was clear. She was buried here. She had existed. So why was the town erasing her? That night, he broke into the local school archives. The building had been converted into a storage center, mostly abandoned, easy to slip into. He found the records room. Files stacked in dusty metal cabinets. He searched yearbooks from 1996 to 1999. Class photos. Rows of children. He flipped page after page. His own face appeared in the 1998 class. Third row, second from the left. But the space beside him, where Anna should have been, was blank. Like someone had cropped her out. Only, the cropping wasn't clean. There was a ghostly outline beside him. A girl. But her face was smudged, her features blurred like someone had scrubbed the photo with a thumb. But he could feel it was her. Anna. And scrawled in the margin beside the page, in faint pencil, "She wouldn't let go." Chills danced down his spine. Back in the motel room, he spread out everything he had: the photo, a copy of the gravestone image, the blurred yearbook page. The wall above the bed soon became a collage of fragments, a visual scream trying to claw its way back into the world. And then the knock. 3 soft taps. He froze. It was past midnight. Another knock. Louder. He crept to the door, looked through the peephole. A girl, standing motionless in the hallway. She looked maybe 9 years old, wearing a dress too thin for the cold. Hair matted to her face. Eyes like wet ash. Matthew's breath caught in his throat. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. But when he turned back inside, he froze. On the motel mirror, written in the condensation, "Come finish it." The final clue came the next morning, from the diner. He returned there out of desperation, hoping someone, anyone, might remember something new. But the waitress from before was gone. An old man sat at the counter reading a paper. Matthew recognized him from the town square, one of the old-timers who never seemed to blink. He approached cautiously. "Sir, did you grow up here?" The man looked at him with a slow, eerie stillness. "Been here all my life." "Do you remember the Walkers?" "A girl named Anna lived on Elkhorn Road." Silence. "Then you should leave," the man said. Matthew tensed. "She's not buried," the old man whispered. "Not all of her." "What do you mean?" But the man just sipped his coffee and stared forward. Matthew left. But the damage was done. He couldn't leave now. Not without finishing this. He returned to the house. The Walker house. The one the town claimed never existed. He entered again. This time, he went straight to the basement. The flashlight stayed on this time, as if the house was letting him through. He explored deeper, behind the wall where the message had been carved. The wood there was weaker, almost hollow. He took a broken metal rod from the floor and began prying at the boards. They gave way. Behind them, a crawlspace. Dark, stale, and filled with something wrapped in rotted plastic. His stomach turned. He pulled back the edges carefully, hands shaking. Inside, bones. Small. Too small. And something else. A ribbon. Red. Frayed. He remembered it. Anna's favorite. And scratched into the concrete behind the bundle of remains. "They made me forget. You remembered." He stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. It spun on the floor, casting wild shadows. Somewhere behind him, footsteps began to descend the basement stairs. But no one had been upstairs. The air thickened. The light dimmed. And a voice, faint and childlike, echoed through the room. "You came back for me." The silence in the basement was total. Matthew stood frozen, the air around him thick like molasses, hard to breathe. Behind him, the soft creak of footsteps descending the stairs didn't stop. Each one was slow, purposeful, as if the house itself exhaled with every step. He didn't dare turn. Instead, his eyes stayed locked on the wall where he had found her bones. The ribbon, still clutched in his hand, was wet now, with what, he didn't know. Another step. Closer. He turned slowly, heart hammering against his ribs like a warning drum. No one was on the stairs. But he wasn't alone. The basement pulsed with something invisible. Grief, anger, memory. It pressed against him, swirled around him, whispered behind his ears. Then, in the far corner of the room, he saw movement. A shimmer, like heat off pavement. Then, form. A girl stood there, facing the wall. She looked about 9. The same age Anna had been when she died. Her skin was pale, translucent. Her hair clung to her face like seaweed in black water. She wasn't breathing. Just standing. Still. Then, without moving her feet, her head turned toward him. Matthew gasped and stumbled back. But she didn't speak. Not yet. She simply raised her hand and pointed to the far side of the basement, where an old armoire stood. The only piece of furniture left in the house. Matthew hesitated, then walked. Each step toward the armoire felt like walking through a nightmare. The kind where you know what's behind the door, but open it anyway. The wood creaked as he pulled it open. Inside, just dust and cobwebs. And one thing more, a journal. Old. Leather-bound. He opened it, and the first page read, "Property of Anna Walker." He flipped through. Drawings. Scribbles. Letters to someone named M. That was him. Matthew. They were childhood letters. Sweet. Full of secrets and made-up games. But toward the end, the pages grew frantic. Scribbled dark shapes. Stick figures with no faces. Shadows with eyes. And over, one word. They lied. Then a final entry. He said if I told, they'd forget me. But I told anyway. And now the forgetting is eating me alive. Matthew's hand shook. His childhood had been full of gaps. Empty weeks. Disjointed memories. He'd seen a therapist once who said it was trauma blockage. But now he knew better. They hadn't forgotten Anna. They had been made to. By someone. By something. A system. A force. A curse. He turned to ask the ghost, Anna, what it meant. But she was gone. Only the ribbon in his hand remained. That night, Matthew returned to the cemetery. He had to bury what was left of her properly. She deserved more than a forgotten grave and a pile of bones behind a rotted wall. He carried her bones in a cloth, gently, reverently, as if she were still breathing. He found the nameless headstone and began digging with his bare hands. The earth was cold, stubborn, but he didn't stop. By the time he laid her down, his hands were bleeding. He whispered a prayer he didn't know he remembered. Then something strange happened. The wind died. The trees stilled. And the headstone. It changed. Right before his eyes, letters carved themselves across the stone. Anna Walker. Born July 8, 1989. Died December 4, 1998. She was loved. She is remembered. He fell to his knees, tears freezing on his cheeks. She was real. Finally. And then the ground beneath the grave trembled. Not violently. Just enough for him to know something had shifted. Unseen, unknown, and watching. The next morning, the town was different. Elkhorn Road reappeared on GPS. The Walker house was listed again on property records. And in the diner, that same waitress from before greeted him with a strange look. "You look familiar," she said. "Were you one of the Walker kids?" He blinked. "You remember them?" "Course I do. Tragic what happened to the little girl." "Anna, right?" He nodded slowly. "Her case never got solved, did it?" she asked. "No," he whispered. "But maybe now it will." Something had been undone. The forgetting, reversed. But not everyone was happy about that. That night, as he packed to leave town, there was a knock at his motel door. He expected the wind. Or a lost guest. But what he saw was impossible. 3 figures stood there. Men in black suits. No faces. Not blurry, just blank. As if their features had been wiped away. The tallest stepped forward. "You opened the door," he said, voice flat and toneless. Matthew swallowed. "Who are you?" "You were told to forget," the figure continued. "But you didn't." The room behind him began to distort. Walls stretching. Lights flickering. "You remembered her," the second figure said. "Now others will too." Which means, the third added, "we must start again." Matthew backed up. She deserved justice. "She was a fault," the first one said. "An error in the order." "Human memory is not yours to rewrite," Matthew snapped. But then he saw something. Behind the faceless figures. Anna. Standing in the shadows. Watching. Smiling. And then she screamed. A sound that shattered the walls of reality. The faceless men recoiled, their heads twisting, their forms glitching like static. The room exploded with light. And then silence. When Matthew opened his eyes, the motel room was whole again. No figures. No shadows. Just calm. And something else. In his hand, now blackened and burned, was her ribbon. But no longer red. Now pure white. He left the town that night. Drove until sunrise, until the roads lost their numbers and the air began to feel new again. But he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. He started a blog, a podcast, then a YouTube channel. He told the story, shared the photos, revealed the journals. People listened, and one by one, others began to remember their own Annas, siblings, friends, names that vanished from yearbooks, empty chairs in childhood classrooms. The phenomenon had a name now, memory bleed. Some said it was a government experiment, others a supernatural virus. But Matthew knew the truth. Anna had been the first to resist it, and he'd been the first to remember. But maybe not the last. Sometimes, when he records his episodes late at night, he sees her. Not in shadow, not in fear, but sitting across the room, smiling, watching, whole. And on the wall behind her, those same words carved into paint. She never left. End of story 5. Story 6. The rain had started the minute they passed the rusted gate. It wasn't pouring. Not a storm. Just a thin, persistent drizzle, like the sky was whispering second thoughts. Gavin didn't listen. He was too focused on the shot, GoPro mounted to his chest, mic hot, flashlight beam cutting through the overgrown path like a knife. Behind him, Amy clutched her DSLR, and Jordan dragged the heavy pack full of gear, grumbling with every step. "Why is it always raining when we film?" Jordan muttered. "Because ghosts love dramatic lighting," Amy replied, her voice chipper. But Gavin didn't laugh. He was staring at the building ahead. St. Elora Psychiatric Hospital. Abandoned since 1986. And according to legend, cursed. It was exactly the kind of place their YouTube channel, Grave Signal, thrived on: urban exploration, horror storytelling, haunted locations. But this one was different. Room 22B wasn't just haunted. It was sealed. Even among ghost hunters, that room had rules. Never knock. Never try to open it. Never even say its number aloud in the building. But Gavin, he saw clicks. The legend was simple. In 1984, a patient named Eleanor Briggs murdered 2 nurses during a psychotic break. She used nothing but a sharpened spoon and her teeth. The nurses were never found, only smears of blood and an open window 6 stories up. Eleanor was found in 22B, rocking in the corner, humming a lullaby in a language no one recognized. She never stood trial. They sealed the room the next day with iron bolts and concrete. Eleanor was never seen again. And now, 40 years later, Grave Signal had bolt cutters and a crowbar. "All right," Gavin whispered, the camera now rolling. "We're live at St. Elora. This is the corridor to the East Wing, last used in 1985. Up ahead is room 22B. The hallway was a skeleton. Paint peeled like shedding skin from the walls. Ceiling tiles dangled like nooses. The air smelled of copper and mildew, thick with time. "God, this place gives me the creeps," Amy said, adjusting her light. "I swear something moved in the stairwell." "Don't psych yourself out," Gavin replied, but his voice was tight. They reached the end of the hall. And there it was. 22B. The door was different from the others. Reinforced steel, triple-bolted, with an iron cross welded across the front. Deep gouges scarred the frame, like something inside had tried to claw its way out. Or something outside had tried to claw its way in. "I don't like this," Jordan said, already backing up. "We've filmed in abandoned prisons and tunnels," Gavin said. "This is just a room." But even as he spoke, his voice wavered. Amy raised her camera. Rolling. Gavin lifted the bolt cutters. Clank. The first lock snapped. Clank. The second. He paused before the third. Last chance to back out. No one moved. Clank. He dropped the cutters and gripped the crowbar. With a groan of rusted metal, the final lock gave way. The door creaked inward, and the air that rushed out smelled wrong. Not just moldy or dusty, but dead. Jordan gagged. Jesus! Gavin stepped inside. The room was small. A bed, overturned. Walls covered in faded writing, hundreds of lines scratched into paint. But not words. Just one phrase. "I'm still here." Over and over. Carved in jagged strokes, smeared with something dark. Amy filmed the room in a slow pan. Gavin stood at the center, shining his light on the floor. "Look at this." A chalk circle surrounded the bed. Symbols lined the edge, some occult, some completely unrecognizable. "What the hell is this?" Amy whispered. "It's like she was trying to trap something," Jordan said. "Or protect herself," Gavin added. He moved to the far wall. A single mirror remained, shattered. But in the shards, Gavin swore he saw movement, just for a second. Like someone darted behind him. He spun. Nothing. No sound. Except, "Do you hear that?" Amy asked. They all fell silent. And there it was. A lullaby. So faint it might have been the wind. But there was no wind. Gavin raised his camera, breath catching in his throat. "This is exactly what we came for," he whispered. The sound grew louder. Not just singing. Humming. Right behind them. Amy screamed. The door slammed shut. Lights died. And the camera feed went to static. Gavin fumbled in the dark. The flashlight had died. The camera's night vision stuttered, then clicked off. And the hum, the lullaby, was louder now. Closer. Amy's breathing was rapid. What the hell just happened?" "Calm down," Gavin said, but even he didn't believe his voice. He turned, trying to find the outline of the door. "Jordan, where are you?" No answer. Just static from the headset and the low, terrible hum that didn't come from any human throat. Amy's fingers found his arm in the dark. "Where is he?" "Jordan." Bang. They both froze. The sound had come from inside the room. Not from the hallway, not from behind the door, but inside, in the corner. Gavin raised the camera again and slapped the battery pack. The screen flickered back on in green night vision, just enough to illuminate the space. And there was nothing. But the humming, it didn't stop. Amy turned her head, trembling. "Gavin, look." On the mirror's shards, scattered across the floor like a broken constellation, a silhouette flickered in the glass. It was a woman, standing just behind Gavin. But when he turned, nothing. Only shadows and the deep, cold breath of the sealed air. Amy gripped her camera, whispering fast, like a prayer, "This is a mistake. We need to get out. We need to get out now." The door creaked. Not open. Closed. Gavin rushed forward, tried the handle. Locked. From the outside. "That's not possible," he hissed. "I broke all the locks." He pulled harder. Nothing. Amy began pacing. "Where's Jordan? Where did he go? He was right behind us." As if in answer, a voice came through the static. A whisper, almost a moan. "Don't let it out." It was Jordan's voice. From the camera feed. Gavin turned the screen toward Amy. The display showed room 22B in infrared. But not as it was now. As it was before. The timestamp read 1984. The footage was grainy, flickering, filmed from the ceiling, like from a hospital surveillance camera. A woman sat on the floor in a hospital gown, rocking. Her lips moved, her hands twitching against her knees. Eleanor. She looked up. At them. Through the screen. Then. Her mouth opened wide. Too wide. Jaw dislocating, unhinged. She screamed. The battery exploded. The screen went black. Amy shrieked, throwing the device to the ground. Gavin stood over it, stunned. How is that possible? That footage doesn't exist anymore. The lullaby started again. This time, inside Gavin's head. It was like his skull had become a music box, slow and broken, echoing with a metallic hum of the tune that made no sense. He clutched his temples. Amy backed into the corner, flashlight trembling in her hand. She was mouthing something now. Stop, 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 as if she couldn't keep her thoughts in. Then, a loud crash from the hallway. Footsteps. Jordan. Gavin ran to the door. Jordan. No answer. But the knob turned. The door cracked open. And Jordan stood there. Alone. Drenched in sweat. His eyes wide. Lips trembling. "Don't go in there," he whispered. "Don't go back in." Amy ran to him and grabbed his arm. "Where were you? We thought." He didn't answer. He just turned and began walking. Down the corridor. Silent. Gavin followed, filming. "Where are you going?" Jordan didn't turn. Just muttered something under his breath. Over and over. "Not supposed to open it. Not supposed to open it." Amy looked back once more at the room, and saw a handprint on the inside of the glass shard. Fresh. They ran. They didn't speak again until they reached the van. The rain was still falling, heavier now, drenching the equipment as they tossed it into the trunk. Gavin barely checked the cases. He just wanted to leave. Amy slammed the passenger door shut. "We are never doing something like that again." Gavin didn't respond. He looked at Jordan. His friend was sitting stiff in the back seat, hands pressed against his knees, rocking slightly. Gavin started the engine. As they pulled away, he looked once in the rear-view mirror. Room 22B's window was lit. From inside. They didn't upload the footage. They didn't speak about it. For 2 weeks, the group went silent. No texts. No posts. Just stillness. Until the emails started. From an unknown sender. With subject lines like, "You left it open. She's still there. She knows your name." Attached were .wav files. Distorted voices. The same lullaby. Played backward. When Gavin slowed one down and reversed it, he heard a voice whisper, "Come back. Finish what you started." That night, Jordan went missing. He wasn't in his apartment. Phone left on the table. Camera bag missing. But his laptop was still on, open to a paused YouTube video. It was Grave Signal's last upload. Exploring the locked ward, room 22B. Except they never posted it. Amy called Gavin in tears. "That footage, it wasn't us," she said. "But it looks like us." He watched it. They were back in the hospital. Laughing. Filming. Walking straight into 22B. Then the door slammed. And static. At the end of the video, a new shot appeared. Not of any of them. But of Eleanor. Standing in the room again. Smiling. That night, Gavin woke up to the sound of humming. Coming from the hallway. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked slowly to the bedroom door. The hall was empty. But the air felt wrong. Heavy. Charged. And as he turned toward the living room, he froze. On the floor, in chalk. A circle. Symbols. Identical to the ones from room 22B. And in the center, Jordan's camera. Still rolling. Still recording. With one note stuck to the lens. "Help her finish it." Gavin stood frozen. The humming inside his head was louder now. Too loud, like a tuning fork pressed against the base of his skull. He didn't move toward the chalk circle. Couldn't. His phone screen flickered. Notifications buzzed one after another. They weren't texts. Not emails. Just recordings. Files with no names. No senders. Only timestamps. Each one marked 3:13 a.m. He tapped the first one. A voice played. His own. Whispering. Shaking. "Don't let her in. She's not dead. She's just waiting. She's in the walls." Another notification. Video. Gavin opened it. His bedroom. Filmed from inside the closet. The video had no sound. No timestamp. Just a slow, steady recording of him sleeping. The closet door creaked open slightly. Shadows shifted behind it. Then the camera cut. Gavin staggered back, heart slamming against his ribs. He didn't own a camera like that. He called Amy. No answer. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. He cursed under his breath, grabbed his coat, and snatched Jordan's camera from the chalk circle. The moment he touched it, a static shock traveled up his arm, but he didn't let go. He had only one place left to go. Back to the hospital. Back to room 22B. The roads were slick with rain, every corner bathed in the orange blur of flickering streetlights. The psychiatric hospital loomed ahead like a rotting mausoleum, its windows empty sockets staring into nothing. Gavin parked at the edge of the lot and climbed out, slinging the camera bag over his shoulder. The main entrance was still chained shut, but the side window, the one Jordan had opened during their shoot, was cracked, just wide enough to slip through. He hesitated, then climbed in. Inside, it was colder than before. Much colder. Like something had sucked the warmth out of the building. His flashlight beam wavered as he walked. Every door looked the same, every hallway twisted with peeling paint and stained tiles. But his feet knew where to go. He didn't need to check a map. He could hear the lullaby guiding him. Room 22B. The door was wide open. It hadn't been before. Inside, everything was just as they'd left it. Mirror shards scattered. Medical restraints torn. The smell, thick, old blood and mildew, hung like a curtain. Gavin raised Jordan's camera. Flipped it on. The screen lit up green. Then, a sound. Not in the hallway. Not down the corridor. Inside the room. The lullaby. But this time, words. A woman's voice, singing. Lay down, lay down. Your bones to keep. You woke me up. Now don't you sleep. Gavin's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly, and the mirror shard on the ground reflected a figure. Standing behind him. He spun. Nothing. But the camera caught it. In night vision, Eleanor was standing in the far corner. White gown soaked with blood. Eyes black pits. Mouth smiling wide. Too wide. He backed up. The door slammed shut. Then locked. Gavin dropped the camera and rushed to the door, pounding his fists against it. Help! Let me out! Let me out! Footsteps behind him. Slow. Dragging. He didn't want to turn. But he had to. The room was changing. The wallpaper peeled away to reveal padded walls, blood-smeared. The overhead light buzzed, and the lullaby grew distorted. Eleanor stood in front of him, mouth moving, speaking, but the voice came from inside his own ears. You let them in. You broke the seal. Now finish it. She stepped closer. Gavin shrank back, heart jackhammering. Finish what? What do you want? She raised a hand, pointed to the floor. The chalk circle, drawn again. Symbols glowing faintly. Inside it, a shape began forming. Jordan, curled up, rocking. But then he looked up, eyes wide. Get out, he screamed. She's in my head. Don't let her. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and he vanished. Smoke. Gone. Gavin fell to his knees. Everything was spinning. Then, a voice. Clear. Real. Amy. Gavin. He looked up. She was at the door, flashlight in hand, trying to force it open. How did you find me? I saw the upload, she said breathlessly. Jordan's video went live again, with a new timestamp. It was broadcasting from inside here. Gavin's hands trembled. She's trying to come through. Amy pushed hard against the door. Move back. He ducked just as the door burst inward. Amy rushed in, grabbed his arm, and pulled. They didn't look back. Not until they reached the stairwell. That's when they heard it. Another voice. From the walls. "Don't leave me," followed by the sound of bones cracking. Outside, the sky was breaking with gray. The first light of dawn. They didn't speak until they reached the car. Both sat in silence, breathing hard. Then Amy turned to Gavin. "She's not dead, is she?" He shook his head. "No. She's trapped." And we opened the door. They looked back at the building one last time. The windows of room 22B flickered. Not with light. With movement. Later that week, Grave Signal's YouTube channel was taken down. Every video was erased. Except one. The final video. No thumbnail. No title. Just a timestamp, 3:13 a.m. In it, a camera sat on a floor in a padded cell. Room 22B. Recording nothing. Until a figure stepped in front of the lens. A woman. Eleanor. She leaned down, smiled, and whispered, "You're next." The video ended. Gavin disappeared 3 days later. No sign of forced entry, but the walls of his apartment were scratched with words. Written over and over. "She wants to finish it." Amy never spoke publicly again. But a private investigator claimed she checked herself into a psychiatric facility under a false name. When asked why, the nurse on shift said, "She wouldn't stop humming." And in her room, carved into the window glass, were the words, "Room 22B never closes." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And hit the bell icon so you never miss a new nightmare. This is Mr. Darsnights, signing off until the next dark tale. Good night, and don't look behind you.